Today I'm going to be making homemade cold process soap. Once the lye has cooled, I pour it into my lard. I use my immersion blender to mix it, which removes a great deal of the grunt work from this job. I mix the soap for about 5 minutes, then take a break for 5 minutes before mixing again. I continue on like this until the soap comes to trace or makes stiff peaks. I don't add any scents to my soap. I don't use any artificial fragrances because of the toll they take on the body, and I think clean is the best smell there is. I have added essential oils to soap before, but the amount of essential oil you have to add to soap is a lot, so the price goes up very quickly when adding essential oil to it. If you do add essential oil to your soap, it should be at the very end of the soap making process, otherwise the heat of the soap will just burn your essential oils and they won't smell as they should. Adding cornstarch to your essential oils before adding it to your soap will also help the scent to be stronger and to last longer, and someday I'd like to add a soap recipe on my blog that describes just how to do this. This recipe can use either tallow or lard or a mixture of both. Tallow makes a more solid bar than lard will. Don't experiment with other types of oils or fats for this recipe, because different types of fats need different amounts of lye and water in them. I buy my lard and tallow locally where it is sold for just 90 cents per pound. This batch of soap cost me $20 to make, which means each bar of soap cost me about 21 cents of materials to make. Purchasing a bar of natural soap with no harsh ingredients in it would cost me much more money than this. It's worth spending an hour of my day to get this much soap for so little money. Once the soap has come to trace, I pour it into my molds. I give each mold a little tap and jiggle to get any air bubbles out, and I let them sit in the forms overnight before cutting them the next morning. After the soap has been cut, it has to cure for about 6 weeks before it is ready to use. While it cures, the soap will become harder and milder. I love having lots of handmade soap on hand because I use it for cleaning practically everything. Most cleaners are detergents, which is not the same as soap. Detergent is synthetic and usually derived from petroleum. It can be very harsh on the skin and on the earth. This soap is gentle, simple, biodegradable, and cleans very, very well. The soap making process may look scary, but the scary part does not last for very long. Once the lye and the fat become soap, it becomes a very gentle product. I also make sure that I clean my surfaces and materials along the way, so nothing is sitting around with the lye for very long. I flush every surface with lots and lots of water while I wait for when I need to stir my soap again. One batch of soap can last our family of 7 about a year, depending on how heavily we use it. For me, it is well worth the efforts of making it on this hot summer day, especially when I know that it will ultimately be a safer product for my family. Because of how large this batch of soap is, there is always plenty to share. Homemade soap is such a fun gift to give, and if someone were into selling on Etsy or at craft fairs, the size of this batch of soap would do very well for that. I've seen so many ways to wrap up bars of soap to dress them up in an especially cute way, but I usually leave mine plain and undecorated even when gifting. Another reason I love this handmade soap is because there is less waste. A bar of soap in the bathroom cannot be poured down the drain by a playful young child like a bottle of liquid hand soap can. When the bars of soap get too small to use, I keep the tiny remains in a jar and either grate them right into my washing machine or melt them down in a pot of water with some washing soda and borax and use it as liquid laundry detergent in my washing machine. I use this soap for bathing and for household chores. I use a cheese grater to grate some into my washing machine to wash our clothes. I used to have a new high-efficiency washing machine, but sold it and purchased this older model instead. The high-efficiency washing machines use very little water and rely on detergent to break down grime and mask the scent, and our laundry was just not getting very clean. Simple soap, water, and sunshine have made such a night and day difference in how clean our laundry is. Soap and water is such a straightforward, back to basics, uncomplicated way to clean everything. I use soap and water to clean practically everything, from mopping floors to washing dishes. On its own, the soap does not get very sudsy, because there is no surfactant added to it. I like some bubbles and a good scrub to our dishes, so I use all my scrap wool yarn to knit washcloths for washing dishes with. When wool washcloths are used on this soap, it suddenly becomes very bubbly, and the wool gives a nice scratch to scrub the plates and bowls very well. Since I don't use superwash wool for these washcloths, they do felt over time, but they become nice little scrubbies that I still use daily. Today, I'm also going to try my hand at sewing some reusable sponges. These sponges have a scrubby side, a soft side, and an absorbent center. After they're used, they can be thrown into the washing machine and used again. Since they use so little fabric, it's a great project for scrap fabric. Their official name is Unsponges, which I think is really cute. The scrubby side of this sponge is made of tulle. While doing some digging to see how other people have made these sponges, I saw that some people use the netting bags used to package onions and oranges at the grocery store as the scrubby part of these sponges. I think that is such a smart idea, and if I didn't already have this tool, I would definitely be repurposing those bags instead. Another material I think would work very well for these sponges is burlap, and next time I have some burlap, I plan to make a bunch of sponges using the burlap for the scrubby side. But I've had this tool forever. It's one of those things where I've had this tool for so long that I can't even remember where I got it. I'm not sure if I was given it, or maybe it was buried in a box of fabric I picked up at the thrift store. Either way, I figure it's time I start using this tool up. My sewing machine really did not like sewing through this tool. It wasn't even the thickness that bothered my machine, and it was pretty thick since I had many layers of cotton quilt batting as the absorbent center of the sponge to sew through. But something about the tool made my sewing machine not want to pick up the bottom stitches. I found when I turned the sponge upside down so the tool was on the bottom, my machine was able to sew stitches normally. It was still a pretty thick sponge to sew through and looked pretty messy by the end of it. I decided to try making a sponge a different way, and I liked the second way of doing it much better. For the second sponge, I only sewed 2 squares of fabric and 1 square of tulle. I cut the tulle larger than the fabric squares to make sure it didn't shift while sewing, and since tulle is a little holy, I didn't want it to easily come undone. I put the layers of the fabric right sides together and put the tulle in the center for a little sponge sandwich, and sewed around and turned it right side out. It was much easier to turn this sponge right side out too. The first sponge was a bit of a pain to turn right side out. For the second sponge, I stuffed it full of fabric scraps and scraps of leftover cotton quilting batting that are too small to use for anything else. I'm going to start saving even my tiniest scraps for these sponges. This is the perfect way to have zero waste sewing. Those teeny tiny scraps that aren't good for anything else will now have a very useful everyday purpose. After I stuffed the sponge, I sewed around it to close it and to hold everything into place a little better. I pushed the fabric scraps towards the center of the sponge as I sewed around it to keep it out of the way. If your sewing machine is finicky with thicker fabrics, I'd definitely stick to sewing these sponges this way. Next, I wanted to work on making some very simple hand towels. This froggy fabric is some fabric that I found at the thrift store. Every so often I have the delight of coming across a big box of fabric at the thrift store for just a few dollars. Sometimes the fabric is not quite my style, or I just don't have a purpose for it, so I'll leave it for the next person to find. But this particular box of fabric had some fun fabrics in it. This fabric is completely cotton, and therefore perfect for towels since it will be nice and absorbent. The little frogs are so cute and raised and fuzzy to the touch, making it an especially delightful fabric to use for a kid's bathroom. For this style towel, I kept it very simple and just put a little loop on one corner so it could be hung on a hook. The last towel I made is a hanging kitchen towel. I purchased these towels new, and although the quality of the fabric for these towels is good, I do not like how wide the stitches are on them. I feel like recently all I can notice on newer clothing or linens is the rushed craftsmanship from poor work environments, and how quickly everything therefore falls apart. It's probably the last time I'll buy hand towels new. They're so simple to make, and I love that I can use secondhand repurposed fabric to make them thrifty and gentle on the earth. I'll be putting links down in the description for my soap making molds in case anyone is interested in them, but I won't be including a link for these towels. If you want to make some hanging towels, you can print out this template for free on my blog, or you can draw it up yourself as it's a pretty simple shape. I folded the towel in half, then gathered it by hand before attaching it to the hanging portion of this towel. These towels will be great in the kitchen and in the bathroom, as I feel like half the time I go to use a hand towel, it has fallen on the floor. Thank you for coming along with me today as I made handmade soap and handmade cleaning supplies for our home. I love making things that end up being very useful and truly used in everyday life. Until next time, I'm wishing you a warm, creative, and productive week.